On a quiet southern street, under flashing red and blue lights, a young black athlete was handcuffed for a crime he didn't commit. When he revealed his father was the chief of police, the officer's confidence crumbled. But the damage was already done. What happened next would expose deep prejudices, shatter lives, and spark a fight for justice no one could ignore. Let's start at the beginning. Justin Thompson walked down the dimly lit street, his worn basketball in one hand, the other brushing against the strap of his backpack. The rhythmic sound of the ball bouncing against the pavement echoed through the stillness of the night, the only companion to his thoughts. The scent of freshly cut grass lingered in the air, mingling with the faint hum of distant crickets. It was a quiet town, a place where the days were slow and the nights even slower. The glow of a single streetlight flickered overhead as Justin approached the corner near Maple Street, his mind replaying every shot he had made during practice. His coach's encouraging words echoed in his ears. "Keep this up, and those scouts won't just notice you, they'll be fighting over you." A small smile tugged at his lips as he pictured his mother's face, beaming with pride at the thought of him earning a college scholarship. Every step brought him closer to that dream, closer to breaking out of this sleepy southern town. But then, the familiar crackle of a police radio pierced the night, followed by the sudden wail of a siren. The sharp strobe-like glare of red and blue lights flooded the street, casting long, distorted shadows against the walls of nearby houses. Justin froze mid-step, his basketball slipping from his fingers and bouncing twice before rolling into the gutter. A wave of fear washed over him, sharp and electric, as the patrol car screeched to a halt just feet away. His pulse quickened, the thrum of his heartbeat drowning out the fading chirp of the siren. 2 officers emerged from the vehicle, their movements deliberate and intimidating. The taller of the 2, Sergeant Reed, adjusted his utility belt as he scanned Justin up and down with a gaze that felt more like an accusation than a mere observation. Officer Miller, shorter but stockier, kept one hand near his holstered weapon, his other hand motioning Justin to stop. "Hands where we can see 'em," Miller barked, his voice low and commanding, slicing through the tense silence. Justin raised his hands slowly, palms open. His throat felt dry, and his voice wavered when he finally spoke. "Sir, Quiet!" Miller interrupted, taking a step closer. The officer's tone was sharp and dismissive, leaving no room for explanation. Reed, now pacing in a slow circle around Justin, added, "We got reports of suspicious activity. Someone matching your description. Young black male, trying car doors in this area. That you?" The accusation hit Justin like a punch to the gut, and for a moment, he struggled to process what was happening. "No, sir," he managed, his voice calm despite the rising panic. "I was just at the gym practicing. You can call my coach, Coach Daniels. He'll vouch for me." Reed exchanged a glance with Miller, but neither officer seemed moved. "Uh-huh," Reed muttered, nodding toward Miller. "Check his bag." As Miller yanked Justin's backpack off his shoulder, Justin felt a mix of humiliation and helplessness. He clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms as he fought to keep his composure. Every muscle in his body tensed, but he kept his eyes fixed on the cracked pavement beneath his feet. Reed began patting him down, his hands moving roughly over Justin's arms and torso. "What's in your pockets, huh? Empty 'em." Justin hesitated before complying, pulling out his phone and a crumpled dollar bill. "That's all I've got," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. As Miller rifled through his bag, tossing out schoolbooks and a crumpled jersey, Justin's eyes flicked toward the neighboring houses. Behind drawn curtains, he could see the faint outlines of faces peering through the slits. A few front doors cracked open slightly, silhouettes framed in the glow of porch lights. These were his neighbors, people who had seen him grow up, who'd watched him shoot hoops at the community park. Yet none of them stepped forward. None of them said a word. The humiliation burned hotter, spreading across Justin's cheeks and down his neck. He felt exposed, judged not just by the officers, but by everyone who chose to stay silent. The weight of their stares, combined with the officers' scrutiny, pressed down on him, suffocating and relentless. "Find anything?" Reed asked. Nothing, Miller replied curtly, his tone almost disappointed as he shoved Justin's belongings back into the bag. But neither officer relaxed. Instead, Miller's hand lingered near his holster, and Reed's eyes narrowed. Justin knew then that the truth he'd spoken wouldn't be enough tonight. Justin stood frozen as Miller grabbed his arm, the officer's grip cold and unyielding. The sharp snap of the handcuffs as they locked around his wrists felt like a final blow, a culmination of fear, anger, and helplessness. The sound echoed down the empty street, louder than the muffled buzz of televisions in the homes nearby, or the soft rustling of the evening breeze. "You have the right to remain silent," Miller intoned mechanically, his voice devoid of empathy. He began to recite the Miranda warning, but Justin's voice broke through, strained and trembling. "Please," Justin stammered, his words tumbling over each other. "Let me call my dad. He'll explain everything. He'll tell you who I am." Reed, who had been standing a few feet away, turned and gave a derisive laugh. "Oh yeah?" he said, his tone dripping with skepticism. "Who's your dad? Some big-shot lawyer? A pastor? Maybe a congressman?" "No," Justin replied, his breathing ragged as panic began to rise. He's Chief Thompson, Jonathan Thompson. He's your boss." The two officers froze. For a brief moment, the only sound was the static crackle of their radio and the distant chirping of crickets. Miller's brow furrowed as he stared at Justin, searching his face for any sign of a lie. Reed's smirk faltered, though he quickly masked it with a dismissive shake of his head. "Chief Thompson?" Miller repeated, his voice now tinged with doubt. "As in Chief Jonathan Thompson?" "Yes!" Justin cried, his voice filled with desperation. His wrist strained against the cuffs as tears began to pool in his eyes. "He's my dad! Please, just call him!" Reed looked at Miller, his skepticism still intact. "Nice try, kid," he muttered, a hint of annoyance creeping into his voice. "Everyone's someone important when they're caught. You think dropping a name's gonna get you out of this?" But before Miller could respond, his radio crackled to life. "Miller! Reed! Where are you?" The voice on the other end was firm and unmistakable. It was Chief Jonathan Thompson. Both officers stiffened, exchanging uneasy glances. Reed's confident demeanor wavered, and Miller's hand moved instinctively to the radio at his shoulder. The weight of the situation was finally beginning to settle over them. We're at Maple Street, Chief," Miller said cautiously, his voice faltering. "Why?" "Stay there," Thompson barked, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I'm on my way." The air between them grew thick with tension. Miller and Reed glanced at each other, their expressions shifting from confident authority to nervous uncertainty. The street, once dominated by their presence, now seemed oppressive as they processed what the chief's arrival might mean. Justin remained silent, his body trembling, but his gaze steady. For the first time since the encounter began, he saw a flicker of doubt, and perhaps fear, in the eyes of the officers. The tables were beginning to turn, but the weight of what had just occurred remained heavy in the air. Chief Thompson had been alerted by a neighbor who'd witnessed the arrest and recognized Justin. He arrived at the scene within minutes, his unmarked car skidding to a stop. The towering man, a respected figure in the community, stepped out, his expression a mixture of fury and concern. The sight of his son, handcuffed and visibly shaken, made his blood boil. "What the hell is going on here?" Thompson demanded, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Reed stammered. "Sir, we didn't realize—" "You didn't realize that's my son?" Thompson thundered. "You didn't bother to call for identification before cuffing an innocent kid?" Justin's eyes filled with tears of relief as his father unlocked the handcuffs and pulled him into a protective embrace. "I'm sorry, Dad," Justin whispered, guilt weighing on him despite knowing he'd done nothing wrong. "This isn't on you," Thompson assured him, turning back to the officers. His gaze hardened. "This is on them." The next morning, the story of the mistaken arrest had spread like wildfire. Chief Thompson called an emergency meeting with his department, addressing not only the incident, but the systemic issues that had led to it. "This was not just a failure to recognize my son," Thompson said, his voice firm as he addressed his officers. This was a failure to treat a young man with the respect and dignity he deserved, regardless of his skin color or who his father is. Miller and Reed were suspended pending an investigation. Thompson also announced mandatory racial bias training for the entire department and initiated community outreach programs aimed at rebuilding trust. As for Justin, the incident shook him, but also ignited a fire within him. He began speaking at local schools, sharing his experience and encouraging conversations about racial profiling and systemic change. The town, too, started to grapple with its own biases, spurred by the courage of a young boy and the unwavering support of his father. And while the scars of that night remained, it became a turning point for the community, a reminder that even in moments of injustice, there's an opportunity to rise, reflect, and rebuild.